kill you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Zaku Talk. This season, G versus Wing. I am your host, Patrick Skeyhill, and joining me this week is this year's pardoned turkey. This won't really make sense for you listeners in January, but Thanksgiving was just last week, so it felt topical.
It's the 5-second rule of debatable voice options that you give me. How are you doing?
Yeah. I'm all right, Bob. Yes, this week we're going to do episode 23 of both G Gundam and Gundam Wing. But before we get into that, Bob, how's your week been going?
My week's been okay. Definitely been having much more of a ADHD style brain. It's only starting to confirm my suspicions, but I am in the works of doing several things, including the prior week I just released the 0.5 version of my game, and I just got the final piece of art the other day, so hopefully within the next week or so I'm going to have my first full game that I am lead dev effectively on, so that'll be nice. Mm-hmm. I am signed up to do classes. I'm going to be doing some of those after I do some more sound work in my office, having gotten some caulking and the like. And yeah, I've been looking forward to hanging out with you this week, which will then lead me to asking, how has your week been, Skeyhill?
Well, pretty busy over here. On this very day, this day of recording, Bob, December 3rd, the year of our Lord 2020, Unreal Engine has a new update. Now the infamous 4.26 is finally out, so I'll have to be spending some time in there as I get ready for my animation project in the spring. Over the next few days, a friend of mine is directing this coming weekend, but her producer is sort of lazy and worthless. So I've been filling in, doing a lot of those duties, taking care of permitting issues, parking issues, catering issues, things of the like. And then her first AD had to enter quarantine protocol for presumed exposure to the coronavirus. So I've also had to fill in for those duties as well. So it's been a pretty hectic week since our last recording, which was not that long ago. Why don't we dive on in, without much ado, to episode 23 of G Gundam. What's going on this week in the world of Domon Kashun? Destined
Battle, Domon versus Devil Gundam, or, in Japanese, Shukumei no Tatakai, Domon Tai Debiru Gundam. I'll let you know that Domon Tai Debiru Gundam is just Devil Gundam there. But Shukumei no Tatakai, we learned prior that Tatakai is battle. Yeah. So we can infer that Shukumei is destined. I'm going to say that that's all you're going to get today.
Okay.
The other members of the Shuffle Alliance all escape the Guiana Highlands. Domon stays back to defeat Master Asia and the Devil Gundam. Meanwhile, in the Neo-Japan space colony, Major Ulube and Dr. Mikamura, yeah, you forgot that those were characters, decide to send the God Gundam down to the Guiana Highlands as the Shining Gundam doesn't have enough power to defeat the Devil Gundam. They are hesitant because the God Gundam was only supposed to be used in the finals. Rain contacts them and informs them that Domon is still stuck in the Guiana Highlands, so they finally decide to send the God Gundam down. Back in the Guiana Highlands, Domon is getting thrashed by Master Asia, who is bent on forcing Domon to engage the super mode. And we're going to talk about a very special scene due to this.
Okay.
The attempts at angry Domon are working, and he is slowly losing control until Schwartzbruder shows up and tries to calm down Domon. Schwartz leaves, hoping Domon will calm down if he fights alone, but Domon's anger wins, and he goes into a rampage. Master Asia is easily able to fend off Domon's wild attacks, but Schwartz comes back to Domon's aid. Master Asia destroys Schwartz's cockpit, seriously injuring Schwartz in the process. This calms Domon down, and Schwartz reminds Domon of his training in the cave. Realizing what his training was for, he achieves a serene state of mind, unlocking the true super mode. He easily defeats Master Asia and attacks the Devil Gundam with his shining finger, seemingly destroying it. Schwartz's mask then falls off as he stops Master Asia from reaching Domon. I told you this was going to be a long one last episode.
I know, it won't end.
What about you, Skeyhill?
Yeah, over here we have Duo, the god of death once again, or in the Japanese, Shinigami ni Modoru Duo. Is this Shin, the Shin and Shinigami, is this like new or reborn?
No, actually, Shinigami, remember how we talked about Yon and Shi a few weeks back? Shi is also read as death in Japanese. So Shinigami is actually death god. Okay. So the god of death, death god. Yeah, I just was sort of curious. I don't know how the kanji matches up, but it makes me think of, Shin Godzilla, and so that was Godzilla. Well, yeah, so Shin different than Shi. Yeah. Yes, you're having to understand that some of these are words, others are parts of words, and it does get difficult. So Modoru then is this kind of like once again thing? Yes, Modoru. Okay. That would definitely be inferred as once again. All right, very good. Well, in this episode, Duo and Oz officer Hildy Speicher clash in ideals as what will bring about peace. Duo, after running into the 5 engineers, allows them to turn him in if he gives them time to finish the construction on both his and Wu Fei's upgraded Gundams. Back on Earth, Sally Poe manages to locate Hero's Wing Gundam. And another fun fact, that in the Cartoon Network version of this episode, they did not want to call it the Death Gundam or the God of Death, so the episode gets called Duo, the Great Destroyer, once again. Still not as bad as 4 Kids. Yes, so episode 23 of G Gundam, in defense of the Professor guy and the Lube guy, the Carrot is really the one who doesn't want to send down the G Gundam very staunch, the new Gundam very staunchly, which seems odd because I don't know. So does he not care about this Devil Gundam roaming around and despoiling Neo Japan's good name? He just wants to win because then they get to call the shots and no one can get mad at him anyway. Yeah, he's looking at this from a very bureaucratic point of view. While my opinion on the character has changed since I was a child, there was the individual named Peck in Ghostbusters. Right? Yeah. He was some sort of major bureaucrat for health and what is it? Ecology in New York. We look at him in the 80s as being a dick, right? But today we realize, no, he was totally right, and the Ghostbusters are the assholes. But in a very similar way, Carrot is more about the bureaucratic aspects of this and is more concerned with the tangible things. He should just be able to be strong enough to be able to defeat the Devil Gundam without having to use their secret weapon, because not only is it a display of power, but it's also going to garner attention from everybody, only serving to add more face when the final match occurs. Yeah, and as the way the episode ends, it certainly looks like Carrot was on the money there. Certainly looks like Carrot was on the money there. Is this like a legal thing to switch out Gundams in the middle of the tournament? I think it's one of those things where as long as it's only one from that nation is active, it doesn't matter. I see. Okay. So it's not that any nation wants to spend millions, if not billions, of their currency, their neo currency, to be able to put out a new model every time the prior one barely gets out of scrap. This one was just set up as, how to put it? This is like saving one of your starting lineups for the final match of a series. That way they're fully rested and capable and completely blow out the person that's been the linchpin of your team opposing. Yeah, it's interesting that sort of sports have gotten so kind of advanced and precise with all these sabermetrics. That really only happens now in baseball and only with starting pitchers. The teams are just too evenly matched to not put your best foot forward. No, certainly. But I'm not a sportsman.
That's okay.
I'm a warrior in philosophy, man.
Sure.
There are a number of scenes that I love in this. And if you could ask my wife right now, how giddy I was, and how absolutely enamored I was with the screen watching G Gundam last night.
Okay, I might do that at some point. We'll see.
But I would ask, do you want to guess what some of these scenes might have been? Give me some of your takeaways.
Might one of them be when which Gundam are we on? Is this the God or the Burning Gundam?
So we are still currently in Shining Gundam, the God Gundam, which in America was translated as the Burning Gundam because we didn't want to do God and the Devil.
Okay.
Because strong Christian overtones not in my mecha.
All right. Might it be when the Shining Gundam turns Super Saiyan?
Kind of. I say it that way because, I understand. Golden Light, superpower, Super Saiyan. Look, if Sonic the Hedgehog can do it without any legal constraints, I don't see there being a problem.
Yeah, things loved turning Super Saiyan in the 90s. They loved it.
Certainly, because, just going golden, we had a love of gold back in the 90s. It was kind of gross. But no, I would say that, yes, that scene was very interesting to me, especially when juxtaposed to the rampage mode that we see Domon go through when he does go angry into super mode.
Are we allowed to talk about the reveal? Is it presumed that we know based on the information we have here?
This scene has been cut due to redacted information. Listen to us next week.
Yeah. So this meditation bit, is that one of the scenes for you?
That is also a very great scene. I thought that having yet another nod to some of these martial meditations was brilliant. Unfortunately, I don't have the proper name written down in front of me. I have a feeling that they did not actively acknowledge it by its Japanese name in your English dub.
Yes. And then this kind of Master Asia being Emperor Palpatine begging Domon to give in to his hate, something like that. Is that one of those scenes for you?
Oh, it's like the pinnacle scene. It's one of the favorites among the entire fan base of G Gundam. And even if you're not a fan of G Gundam, it's just an absurd scene, especially in the dub, because in the Japanese, it actually read. In the English, I'm going to do my best imitation.
Yeah, okay.
Get mad. Get mad. Get mad. Get mad. Get so mad that you go mad. Get mad.
Yeah, it was a tricky one in the English, I will say.
Well, so it actually translates the way that I just said it as that on the dub.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, not the dub, the sub.
Yeah.
So regardless of what they were actually saying, because again, I'm not a fluent speaker of Japanese.
Yeah.
It's still read that way, but at least with the way that it was being said, the inflection there, it felt more realistic than the almost absurdist take that I felt the English voice actor added to it.
Yeah, the director was just like, all right, we really want you to chew the scenery on this one.
Looking at the visuals and solely the visuals, I wouldn't be surprised. But I also want to note that through all that, I personally enjoyed watching Domon act and put Master Asia so far on his back foot that it actually turned his hair whiter.
Yes. Is that a reference to something in the genre or in Japanese culture that this event would happen?
Well, it's more along the lines of I think a general pan-cultural idea of fear or stress.
Yeah.
The stress of that attack was so great, that assault on Master Asia, not just from a physical but also from a mental place, that it forced his hair to go white. We've referenced it in anything from this to Stephen King's It, the miniseries, where the big bully was so frightened by what he saw that he actually had his hair all turn white from the pure stress of it all.
Yeah, it was that was a hard one I kept waiting for like a little Master Asia ghost to fall out of his mouth and like a silly music to kind of come.
Oh no, that scene was super sincere. It's one of the best fights in the entire show.
Well, then the white hair visual perhaps a bit too strong.
Yeah, it definitely seems stark and almost seems like a very common thing that happened in 90s cell animation where at some point the colorist throws something off and you're waiting for the color to go back, but it just didn't. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I've actually thought about it because these Blu-ray versions from Right Stuff, very clean transfers, and I wonder how well that color change would read, if I went back and found a DVD or like an old broadcast of it.
If you watch it on Crunchyroll, though, it still keeps a lot of that grain.
Okay. Overall, the fight scene's fine. I'm trying to be fair to it because it has an issue in this episode that that Gundam Wing has in the episode we'll talk about this week, where I wish we had like more time. I wish in G Gundam we spent less time on last week's episode and setting up and taking some of the setup from this episode and put it there so that this kind of transformation that Domon has can kind of have a little more time to breathe. He can find that meditation a little more reasonably for my taste. And, then I'm kind of more on board with it as he gets there and then becomes Super Saiyan Domon. But like, I get that we have to get there. You're getting to the halfway point. You have more show you want to do. I would have kind of just shifted things around to let this moment have more time because I think this is the one you want to have more time.
I see what you're saying, but I think it's also in direct antithesis to what most people have a problem with while we are on the topic of Super Saiyans.
Yeah.
Dragon Ball Z as an animation is very well known for having, during the Frieza saga, something that would have been very popular in this particular moment in America, for having I want to say between 5 and 15 episode power up that is supposed to take the space of over 5 to 15 minutes. We have nearly at least 5, if not more. I'm not a devout Dragon Ball watcher, so bear with me here, kids. But the point being, nobody who has ever seen anime can't still I'm using my negatives poorly. Anybody who knows what anime is but has never watched it will still reference the overly long power up. It's a comic trope at this point. And so I think that they were doing the opposite of that because it probably didn't read well even in Japan at that point, that we just want to have this moment that is supposed to be a quick fight to begin with. It's not like they're, having this major godly battle yet. We haven't reached that level of power on either side. And we see that Domon needs the loss of someone that he has some connection to and can't quite figure out, which we discussed just moments ago, about that person nearly falling and dying, to realize that his rage is what's going to let him die and nearly have another person lost on his behalf. He feels responsible for the loss of his mother and the apprehending of his father. So if he had lost this individual, that would be on his conscience too. And there's only so much weight a person can hold. So he tries to come back in the moment, and in finally listening and realizing that people care about him and want him to live, is able to reach that state. And we're slowly but surely understanding that, hey, maybe rain is a part of your ability to focus as well. Maybe having someone to care about and not being a stoic caricature of what a warrior is, but being a true warrior of justice. Speaking from my shitty tokusatsu self.
Yeah, if that was what they were afraid of, it's understandable for the same reason that when people, try to make, I don't know, The Hobbit or Jurassic Park 2, they attempt at recreating what people liked about the first ones, but like what everybody is missing about those that made them great, I think they're missing here. What made those power-ups bad is that it was just like Goku or Frieza, whoever was just like, I'm powering up, and then we just sort of watched them do that for a really long time. But this one, so like they just do it. Like they just know how to do it, and suddenly they do it. This tries to eke that out a little more, but then it's just like Domon's like, I'm angry, and then German guy's like, remember the cave. And then he just sort of like remembers the cave and sees the water and like, oh, he's got it. He's figured it out sort of suddenly. And I just would have liked more time of Domon inside of himself, finding that meditation, being in this interior life. And then like, we're not wasting time. We're like with Domon on his journey.
I get what you're saying. I'm gonna riposte with a piece of homework for the listeners this week. But first, a question to you.
Yeah.
How often have you taken in any kind of martial arts film?
Probably a good chunk around 2010 to 2013. So it has been a while. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I just want you to keep that in mind while I give the homework.
Okay.
Listeners, we are in a very troubling and frustrating time, and it is very easy to get overwhelmed. I want you to, in this moment, pause the podcast and go sit somewhere, ideally on the ground, so that way you're not being supported by a chair or something. If you need to, by all means, do so. And then just sit there, hands on your knees, and I want you to breathe in for about, say, 11 seconds, and then out for 7. I want you to do that 3 times. It might be the reverse. It might be 7-11. Do what works best for you. And when you're done with that, I want you to think, where is my head now? And to skeyhill in this very moment, now that we're back, I want you to think, in those moments, if you can collect yourself, you may very well find that it is easier to get to a clearer headspace. We may not have a gigantic monstrosity and a storm and people bleeding to death near us in that moment, but we do have the common everyday stressors that are involved. And if we want to at least create some sort of a high tier, low tier situation where Domon's already on a high tier, so his stressors need to be much higher for it to be equivalent to us on the low tier, we can see that by taking a moment, finding a way to create a focus in front of us, and then trying to use that to bring us to a place of peace. That is actually a fairly quick thing to do, and we just, for us on the low tier, end up forgetting that it is a quicker thing to do, and we just brush it off and get lost in our own tizzy. I believe that they did a perfectly fine job for what they were doing. Now, on top of that, I come back to the movie concept here. In a film, unless we're going to devote an entire scene to watching this person going through some sort of a mental space and walk around and really interact with this part of their subliminal mind, if we want to take a note from Sherlock and do a mind palace moment, I can get that. But generally speaking, in something that is either a 2-hour, let's condense the story thing, where I think you might be getting this from, or from a serial, I don't think we need to spend that much time in Domon's head. We've already done that whole bit in the cave 3 or 4 episodes ago. So I feel like, and this is my opinion, it's doing what it needs to do for this moment, because we're probably going to have a scene very much like what you're speaking about in another quarter of the series.
Yeah, it's fine. But like there was he did that 3 episodes ago, but then still couldn't do it. So I needed more to buy that suddenly now he could, when all series / all episode, he did not have the ability to do it.
I just want to note that in that case, I don't think it's that he can't, it's that he doesn't realize. It's a density thing. It's not an incapable place. He doesn't realize that that ability to focus in the cave is the secret, and he doesn't realize that peace is what he needs as this martial artist / samurai individual. This is something that you see often in this type of media. It is not the rage that you want to pull into. Yeah, that adrenaline does give you a sense of boost, speed, strength, and you feel like you're getting there. but it is inner peace and that ability to look at things calmly and rationally that allows you to exactly and precisely act and not worry that you are acting so deeply on impulse that you are unaware of your surroundings. It's the difference of, for my Magic the Gathering players here, playing Esper Control versus Red Deck Wins.
Yeah, I'm sure our audience will really understand that reference.
Listen, nerds tend to interact with each other. If they don't play themselves, they know someone who does and can explain it to them.
Okay.
But I think that this is logical enough that people can get it through context.
Okay.
I don't care, man.
Give me your other takes on this episode. You're a big fan of it, so tell us everything that you enjoy about it.
I feel like this story, this episode does a great job in everything from the shots that it gives us, the visuals to help represent what we're seeing, both in terms of the scenery and background, as well as what we're seeing in Domon's state of going between a feral abomination and this place of possibly holy enlightenment. And this is where we're starting to see how the God Gundam is going to come into play in a God versus a devil moment later on, and why this series may very well be called G Gundam. Whoa. It's almost like we get that lost on us when we don't call the God Gundam, but instead the Burning Gundam. Anyway, I do enjoy a lot of these fights. There are a lot of great cinematic visuals going on in the way that the fight choreography occurs, and this complete 180 on who is the master and who is the neophyte between Domon and Master Asia. We're finally starting to question who's this person behind the mask that Neo Germany wears. And for, again, myself and my Toku friends that might be residing out there, I like that his mask has the Vulcan on it because it further represents something of a masked hero that most people would know from Toei, Kamen Rider. A lot of them have had a Vulcan on their head at one point or another to represent the antennae of the various grasshopper or bug adjacent individuals that they seem to share in. I appreciate that we are seeing that we're going to start resolving some of this apocalyptic storyline for the time being in order to start focusing on the human aspect that will occur once we get to the semifinals over in Neo Hong Kong. I think that we are going to find that there's going to be more of what you like in Gundam showing up in the coming episodes, even if it's going to be with a silly backdrop of, oh, hey, look at these funny Gundam that look like different nation stereotypes. I do think that the subtlety of Gundam might be made a little bit more bombastic by these visuals, but I do think that the interactions between the people over the course of the next quarter of the series are going to be more in line with what you expect from Gundam. Yeah,
but like even without it, like I don't mind it because this Gundam sort of clearly exists in a very special kind of universe with its own physics. So like if it's like, I don't mind if it wants to go sillier. Like I would buy it. I would have an easier time with that because it's already in kind of a silly universe.
Literally in the next 3 to 5 episodes, you're going to see a Gundam from what is it, Neo Holland or whatever? Yeah, the Noble Gundam or the Nobel Gundam, as you'll probably hear it, which is made to look like it's in a Sailor Seifuku, like they're a Japanese character, even though they are coming from Neo Holland or wherever it is that I keep messing this up. Where does the Nobel Peace Prize come from? Switzerland?
Yeah, Switzerland.
Okay, so Neo Switzerland has the Nobel Gundam.
Yeah, Holland has
Noble,
the big
depending
windmill.
on which version you're listening to.
Well, that will be see that like if you're gonna do that G Gundam, like just own it, you know. So like fine, I'm okay with that.
Listen, this is an SD Gundam. Let's at least be happy with that. Okay?
I'm definitely glad that the Gundams aren't sentient and have faces with moving mouths. Thank goodness we haven't jumped that shark in G Gundam.
I honestly don't mind it, and SD Gundam was a thing before we got the 3D version back in the 2000s.
Yeah, I hate them all. I hate all of them. I don't like any but I'm not. That's not.
Japan loves that.
I know they do. Of course they do. Of course they
did
do.
it with Kamen Rider. They've done it with a bunch of other series. They love doing let's do a joke version of this series and see what we can do while still doing head nods.
Yep, they're very popular models. They're going to keep doing it. I acknowledge it. I just won't take part in that part of the fandom.
Sure.
Not for me.
But I feel like we've had too much time with G Gundam. Let's talk about Gundam Wing.
Well, it's a good week to spend more time on G Gundam. Well, I'm always a little underwhelmed by this episode. How did
this particular episode?
Yeah, but you're a big Duo fan, so how'd this one go for you?
I think they did. This episode was definitely quicker on Wayne's side, just as this one with G might have been for you. I did like that we got to spend more time with Duo, who I feel has sorely had the least amount of screen time of the five, or at least in any noticeable way. I'm glad that we got to see more of his scoundrel nature that was alluded to in earlier episodes by you, but I have yet to see. Mm-hmm. I like that we are getting to see what's actively occurring with the various doctor, instructor, etceteras. And I was actually just talking yesterday before watching episodes with a friend who is a fan of Gundam Wing, and she mentioned that one of her favorites was Hilda, which she referred to by the last name, which was again
Spiker.
Yeah. Spiker. Thank you. Spiker, I think is interesting. They did very much just throw her into the fray, and I feel like she's very much like what I thought Sally Poe was in episode 3, sort of just a quick drop. Mm-hmm. But I guess she's going to become a tad more prevalent as we go on.
Yes.
I hope that she does become if not a love interest, because unfortunately that's what I've been made to believe with these kinds of inserts. Oh,
they very strongly want you to ship them in this episode. They go out of their way to do that for you.
Oh yeah. I appreciate that it starts off with this very almost antagonistic interaction that Duo keeps imparting on Hilda.
Yeah.
Where she just tries to hey, you're cute and you look like you're capable. Just join us. Become one of us. Okay. But instead, how about middle fingers and backs into one of those Leos? Calls it a day. I thought that it was a lovely episode overall for getting a better sense of Duo and what he's willing to put up with. What he's capable of, which seemed to be underplayed for the better part of the series so far, and getting to see him finally start meeting up with Wu Fei and Hiro.
Yep.
And that they're not ignorant to the situation at hand either. So we're starting to get all our puzzle pieces back together and get to see them hopefully in their new machines in, as they said, 1 month from that moment.
Correct. We are now kind of putting all of these chess pieces in place with these pretty much since episode 19 or something, when I said we're full steam ahead. We're trying to get everybody where they belong so that we can have our big Gundam Wing's big mid-tier ordeal kind of showdown that Domon's finishing up soon.
Yes.
We're going to see it carry over the next 2 episodes. Very interesting fashion. So the only person who was kind of left off where we didn't have them was Duo, or we hadn't seen him in forever. So we had to spend some time with him, which I think is a good idea. And I definitely think you're right. They haven't spent that much time with him compared to some of the others like Catra. So they both kind of get their own little episodes, which is useful. My issue here is, I brought up with Domon's arc, is that Hildy's arc is too quick. It's I think the construction of the episode is sort of flawed because while we do get to see other sides of Duo, he's not arcing here. It's just we're just kind of peeling back the layers of the onion. And so and Hildy's the one who's changing. So if that's the case, I think we should do what we did with episode 4 with Noin and Wu Fei, where we follow around Hildy for a bit, an easier way to kind of get her in. We see what's going on in the Oz lines. She comes across Duo, and then Duo's more scoundrelly nature can come across more interestingly because it's coming from a quote-unquote antagonist point of view here. And now because we're spending more time with Hildy than Duo, who's just sort of not really doing much, we get to kind of feel Hildy's arc and have more time to kind of believe that. So that would have been nice for me. That's how I would rewrite this.
Okay, and I'm not going to try and take too much of this episode. I feel like I've been doing a lot more of the talking this time around, but I want to pose the question.
Yeah.
Where there was no manga at the time to base this off of, which is what a lot of anime is known to do. They'll find a manga and then make an anime based on it. We're starting with an anime.
Yes.
Do you think that perhaps they didn't realize that Hildy was going to be as prominent a figure in this moment? And so because of that, they were just using her as a sort of way to have a general soldier individual that you can have as a, hey, not all soldiers are assholes.
I don't want to speak too authoritatively on how how Japan kind of writes shows like these that have these predefined ends. But my guess is by the time they would have had pretty much the arc of everything kind of pre-planned out, much like a season of an American television would do. And you kind of make these discoveries along the way. So there is that chance that by the time they got here, they liked what was going on between the two. So that option could be there. I will say that once they finally got the manga version of it, they just skipped this chapter altogether. And so it gets confusing when Hildy's just suddenly hanging around with Duo, and you kind of would want to see that meet cute a bit more in play. But so yeah, I don't know. I like this idea of having a character, a more recurring character show up very late into the show. I think more shows should take advantage of that, but American audiences have a hard time with it for some reason. So like it's a great thing to kind of do here, and a way to make that kind of sell better is starting with Hildy. So I'm not faulting them for doing it, whatever, in 95. People just, the toy people are like, show Duo. We want Duo. But I just, if I'm rewriting it, that's the way I'm doing it, because I think you get a stronger and more interesting episode out of it.
I will note that, again, coming from my place of tokusatsu, right? It has not been uncommon in, especially from around this time, realistically, a little later forward, that we start seeing a lot of these recurring characters show in a mid-series place, so that way we can start developing these greater connections to players that came in later than who we should be focusing on, but still have another toy piece, another individual that we can play around with and do as we will as the audience. Very often in my shows, we have our Sixth Ranger. For you out there, it's, oh boy, Tommy showed up, best thing ever. Fuck that. But in Japan, this is when you would get your sixth. This is when you would get your secondary rider, who would go out there and be a great foil to whatever you've been used to at this moment. Whether that means that they are more of a rival type or a goofball or whatever, it is generally a good way to balance out an individual. So I would say that the way that they have applied her here is in line with that mentality. And I agree with you. I think that it's probably just due to the way that the Hollywood machine works. That, I mean, being real for a second, listeners, the Hollywood machine wants you to keep churning out the same kinds of stories in their respective genres, add a few flavor tweaks, repackage it. We know how to shoot it, get it out there, maximum cash for minimum effort.
Yeah, and if you want to go in line with sort of your viewing of it, this kind of common rider, like, look at it, that'd be fine too, in which case just have Duo be the one who learns something from his encounter with, like, he realizes, like, oh shit, we're both fighting for the same, you're fighting for the colonies, I'm fighting for the colony, and like he makes a transformation based off of that knowledge of, like, is it possible for enemies to fight for the same thing, and like that could affect his tactics, which would be a good point to have him change his worldview since he is at the halfway point. So like there are multiple ways to kind of fix this.
I think he does. It's just underplayed because we're trying to use him as our audience vehicle. We are using this new character that we're dropping in, very much like what I'm referring to with some of this rider stuff. Yeah, it's a new interaction for the character that we should be applying ourselves to, but we're going to spend some more time focusing on this new individual to really get a sense of what their to get a sense of what their mentality is, to see how they manage things. I feel like if we had spent less time with Hilda, it would be more jarring to see her from this point forward. Sally Poe had a perfect level of interaction for her initial start of the series. We had a beginning and end point in that episode of what she was about. And if we had to leave her there, it was fine to drop her off. But I feel like we had more time with her and no growth on Hero's part during episode 3, you know?
Yeah, but and they really take 2 episodes to set up Sally Poe. There's like the introductions there, but like the real sense of who she is we get when she's in that gorilla fight with Wu Fei.
Agreed.
So
100% agreed.
Yeah, so like
and I think we're going to get that with her.
Yeah, and so like that's fine. I don't really see much of a change here in Duo. He begins the episode being like, your space colonies are dumb because you're falling for Oz's traps. And she's like, Oz doesn't have traps. Oz cares. And by the end of it, she's like, yeah, I guess Oz has traps because like one guy was firing on you without a warning shot. So I've changed my mind. And Duo's still trying to go and blow up the lunar base and stop Oz. So, like, I haven't really seen much of a change here from Duo. I would have liked to have seen something more because that recognition that Duo has where he's like, wait, I'm fighting for the colonies is such a great moment. I'd like to see that translate into something more for him going forward, but it never really does. It just sort of is an interesting thing for us, the audience, to consider.
I'm going to finalize this point of my train of thought here with, I feel like there was a choice on the writer's part. Do we give a transformation to a character who we haven't really gotten a chance to fully establish, or do we continue to establish this character based on presumptions that we have and then allow for transformation down the line if we in fact give him that option? I think they went with the latter and decided to actually give us a better base for what we're supposed to believe Duo is, as opposed to giving a change to a blank piece of paper. There hasn't been a change. It would have just been an establishment regardless.
Well, that's why giving her more time helps, because you get a little bit of time to set her up and not make her blank, and then we have time to watch
I'm not talking about her. I'm talking about Duo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Duo, I mean, I think what we got from Duo here, we could get if he had less screen time. I don't think the time they devoted to him was necessary for us to get the information we needed, especially since it could all be happening in the background of Hildy's story. Like, it could just be there as Hildy's overcoming obstacles that Duo is creating for her. That would be interesting.
I'm going to ask a genuine question. This is not meant to be pointed.
Okay.
Do you think this is because you have watched this series 8-10 times that you've seen it so much that maybe there's an over drilling of these particular characters in this episode?
No, I don't. I think it might have to do with me having consumed all the media I have in my time. But I think, I think we don't, especially TV doesn't give audiences enough credit, where I think if you see this stuff happening not from Duo's point of view, you're able to get, okay, rogue, thief, scoundrel, breaks out of handcuffs really easily. Like, Duo isn't really offering us new information just in here. And yeah, I have the advanced knowledge that the things that he does in this, or the things that he learns in this episode about Hildy and that reveal he has doesn't translate to anything. But, like, we don't see it happen in this episode anyway. So it just feels like kind of one static kind of moment. And, like, especially since it's pretty much the only story in the entire episode, I would want to see a little more of an up and then a down.
I mean, I guess I can see where you're coming from. I wonder if at this point it's just a matter of our tastes and what we're willing to accept as part of the meal. You know, some people like the salad, some people don't, and they'll still eat it.
It could be, but I guess I'll save this I'll score this little note away, and the next time you're mad that an arc hasn't happened, I'll be like, well, it was okay when Duo didn't have one, and we'll go from there.
So my question is, what do you think it is that I might have an issue with when it comes to arcs in Wing? Because I know with G Gundam, I have my preset expectations because I've seen that one and I understand the language with which it speaks.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you're right. It might be a taste thing, but I think part of it, of our tastes, is sort of like the media that we've grown up with. And maybe you're just, I don't know, you're used to a certain type of meal. And so, like, you're, I don't know, willing to settle or something. I don't know.
Well, I think that's not far-fetched. In real-world terms, I am more willing to settle for a Subway sandwich when you want to go down to the sandwich shop that was back in the town we both used to live in, you know?
Yeah.
You're ultimately correct in getting that in that sandwich, but that doesn't mean that I'm not willing to say, oh, no, it's okay. An Adam Sandler sandwich is fine today.
But
definitely not a plug for your other podcast. Where the hell are they now?
What the hell happened to them? What?
Yeah, even better.
What I would going through these Rock movies, I would give anything for more Adam Sandler films. Anything.
Really?
I cannot. The Rock is so boring. So
hold on.
Yeah.
This is why I want to bring back episode 12 that I was just talking about, or episode 11. You had been talking about the Southland
Tales. Yeah, the only good movie he's ever done. The weirdest movie he's ever done. And The Rock playing the weirdest version of anything I've ever seen him do. But every other than that, he's just like smug, a good-looking guy. Everything's kind of going for him. And like, haha, he's like the jock in high school who thinks he's the hot shit, and like he's talking to the nerds, like because he's trying to talk
about Andy Grayfish.
He's trying to be nice, but no, this is different from Andy Grayfish, who legitimately thought he was a nerd. But the jock thinks like he's doing a good deed by talking to the nerds and showing off to the popular girls like what a nice guy he is. But like he's sort of like trying to subtly demean you in the process. Like I don't think The Rock is likable. I don't get the charisma everybody's seeing. And yeah, it's just so fucking boring. And all the movies he does are also stupid, but like not like absurdly stupid. They're just like dumb, forgettable films.
The way you said that is beautiful because it is very similar to what you had said at one point when you were trying to explain the Adam Sandler series of this podcast to me. It's you were asking around why people watch Adam Sandler films even now as part of your hypothesis, your thesis. And somebody said to you, well, it's the Sandman. I got to watch it. And it just blew your mind that, okay, there's this warmth, this familiarity with that actor. And so you're more willing to buy what they're selling regardless of, because you have fond memories of a role or several roles that they have done. And it's fun to see this antithesis where people genuinely like The Rock, not for the reason of him being a great actor. He commits to a kind of character role and people keep hiring him for it, much in the way that people like to do for Adam Sandler, except with The Rock, he commands an A-lister's budget because he is a constantly well-built individual who is white passing. He is not white. And I'm glad to say that. He's American Samoan, as I'm to understand.
Yes.
And he is well known for playing this absurd, bombastic, big character that he was in the WWE. And just they kept putting him into roles that were very much him mugging at the camera in the same way that people used to do it with Hulk Hogan back in the 90s. They literally used the same formula, just updated. And people still just accept it. Like when he did Scorpion King as a guest bit first and then a full straight to VHS DVD release, it was absurd. And it was definitely a WWE film, to say the least. But it was an opportunity to see something that felt good, felt comfortable. It was your mac and cheese. It is not good to eat mac and cheese every day, but some people don't mind having missed passes. You know?
Well, so here's my problem with The Rock is that, like, he's not really absurd. And, like, we can call it absurd, but really this is what all action films are now. They're just trying to top themselves. The problem with The Rock is Adam Sandler has the advantage of, like, being down on his luck and goofy and, like, the underdog. But The Rock always comes in and he's just, like, tough muscle guy. And he's sort of like a bad RPG player. He's just always making a rational decision for no reason. Just doing the right choices, beating up guys very easily when they come up. And then, like, he smiles and, like, we're done. So, like, there's nothing to get behind here.
My two examples, just while we're on the topic of your other podcast, while we're on this podcast. One is The Tooth Fairy, right?
Terrible movie.
It's a terrible movie, but that's the kind of film that I'm talking about when we're talking about his early career. It's let's put The Rock in a situation that is antithetical to what we have as his image. We have this big buff guy dressed like a tooth fairy and going around and trying to take care of stuff with this little girl. And it's also just a big box knockoff of Toothless, which was a made for Wonderful World of Disney film back in the late 90s, starring Kirstie Alley. Point being, it was a trash film that they just used imagery for, and it worked. And it's the same kind of thing that they do with other actors at this point. But the other film that comes to mind for me here is Get Smart. Have you gotten to that film in his filmography
Yes.
yet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, he definitely plays exactly what you're talking about, but with the added twist, that he's not the good guy.
Yeah, like in both...
Spoiler alert for a movie from a decade ago.
In both Get Smart and Doom, he starts off being a good guy and then becomes a bad guy, or is revealed to be a bad guy. I think that's great use for The Rock. Those have been some of the movies I've tolerated and more. The problem with the Tooth Fairy, aside from the shoddy premise of like, let's put big muscly guy in a tutu, is that he can't sell it because his acting is so poor and wooden that they already terrible jokes can't ride. It's like, oh, it's unwatchable.
That film though was out like in the earlier part of his non-wrestling career. That was, it wasn't as early as his Scorpion King stuff, but it was still in that era, that early part, which again it's almost a perfect opposite to your Adam Sandler series. His first film, Going Overboard, was awful. It was unwatchable as far as I'm concerned. I remember watching it as a teenager when I should have thought it was funny.
Yeah, very bad.
But his early films, you know, Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison and all those early ones, they were doing very well because they fed into what he was already good at. But then time kept going where he would, you know, try to do the same thing, but with a slight tweak, and it was not strong. So he had to really start developing himself as an actor and not just a comedic buffoon. We're seeing the opposite, where people seem to like The Rock when he was doing things that were out of his element, out of his league, and liked seeing that off-kilter way of managing an actor in a film, and people just bought it because it's The Rock. That's fine. It's funny. But now we see him trying to either be a kid-friendly actor by way of watching these like Jumanji pseudo-sequels, or we see him in these things like, what is it, Skyscraper or whatever?
Yeah, who the fuck cares, Bob?
Rampage.
They're all the same movie.
I know, and that's my point, is that people have given up on him because they've actually put him in roles that fit what his acting criteria offers. You get the errant good film in between where he plays generally a voice acted role. I'm thinking of Moana. And people will love his acting in that because it's not him trying to act. It's just him emoting, and then the animators do what they need to make it work, you know?
So to wrap up before we go to The Way We Go,
yes.
You know, I think The Rock's career is sort of a byproduct of the issues that are in Hollywood. I think your sort of viewing on Adam Sandler's timetable and motivations are a little off, but you haven't seen a lot, so that's fine. And I
haven't had to go through your
exactly.
onslaught,
my big issue with sort of my big takeaway from having done all this Rock and having done all this Adam Sandler is that like Adam Sandler, jelly donut, The Rock, saltine. So that's been my issue with The Rock's movies. All right, so in The Way We Go.
Like sand through the hourglass, this is the way that we go.
It made me think of, as we were talking about, you know, kind of the duo having to have a major chunk of this because of sort of the Bandai machine and things like that. But then as we're starting to see these two new Gundams being made for Wu Fei and Duo, I thought like, and then Domon getting his new Gundam, I thought like, I wonder what these shows would be like if they weren't meant to sell toys. Like would all these different kind of Gundams appear? Would these upgrades be sort of not be staples anymore of the Gundam canon? Like did this come out of a need to make toys? Like how would Gundams look? How important would the Gundams be to these shows? That was just sort of an interesting thought experiment that I had for us to consider over the coming week.
Well, to that end, I will make my initial response to that idea. I think that on the one hand, yes, we would get more in terms of character development and things of that nature. But I also feel like we wouldn't give as much credence to these series as we do, because there is something to that element of new, that that thing that we remember from our growing up in the 80s and 90s and whatever, where toys and upgrades and power increasing were always part of what drew us to these kinds of stories at first. As adults, as two 30-somethings that are watching these animations from 20 years ago at this moment with our film and television backgrounds, it is a very different thing that we're looking to, but we're still accepting that part of the story. And I don't think that we would be talking about them at all if we didn't have that upgrade and toy value.
All right, very interesting point. What is your way we go this week, Babu?
My way we go this week, I think, has to be... I think it has to do with the fact of the... I'm at a loss. I kind of want to talk about the duality of man and how this inability to accept our flaws and calm ourselves and become more willing to change is a thing that came to mind while I was watching G Gundam, but also shiny Gundam go. I was just so enthralled with G Gundam's episode and all the flags that reminded me why I fell in love with G Gundam in the first place, and eventually Tokusatsu as a whole art form.
Yeah,
that, you know, that was really it for me. And I've basically gone over what made me think of Gundam Wing this week, which is I love scoundrel characters. And I personally enjoyed this episode. I do think it was short-lived, and it's not going to be one of the major episodes of the series, but there was a comfort in this episode. It's a bit of a palate cleanser for getting into the nitty-gritty of the coming episodes. Yeah. And I like that charismatic jerk that is Duo Maxwell. There's something about him that screams to me, hey, what's going on? Yeah. Like there's just, I love that character archetype. But as far as having watched them both overall, I feel like, one, I need to get back to doing my Gunpla. I have been sorely behind on touching any of them. But like, I really am looking forward to seeing what is going to happen with all these new models that we're going to be getting between both series. Yep. And it kind of mirrors what you were talking about. What would happen if we didn't have these things? Mm-hmm. Would I still like G Gundam if I didn't know God Gundam was coming down the line and all these other absurd pieces that are going to be in front of us? Would I be as excited to build the upcoming upgrade to Death Scythe if it wasn't going to exist and it was just my option of liking Death Scythe versus Wing, et cetera, et cetera? Yeah,
these are very interesting questions I like to think about as I sort of take a look at our kind of production cycle in the modern age. All right, well, let's go and take a seat down at the nerd corner, Bob.
Let's take a walk to the nerd corner, where we will talk about a lot of nerd stuff. Yeah.
All right. My nerd corner I've done before, but I finally finished the series. I had just sort of began it when I brought it up early on, but I've gone through the 6.5 volumes of Goodnight Poon Poon, and I want to bring it up again because it's fantastic. It goes in a million directions. It's not at all this. You could never in a million years guess what the story is going to be about, sort of on the specific level. It spans, a decade plus of this one character's life. The art style is great. It really utilizes this impressionistic kind of view. It takes advantage of the manga type medium to really get across a very grounded sense of this character going through sort of this human experience, but on a unique kind of plane of experience. I don't even know how to describe it. So I'm definitely recommending it for you all again. Check it out. Goodnight Poon Poon, available wherever manga is sold. Bob, what do you have for us this week?
I don't know that I've brought this one up, but I'm going to bring up a book myself. I'm going to bring up the follow-up to Ali Broch's 2013 hit, Hyperbole and a Half, which was effectively a compilation of a bunch of pieces that she'd done for her online blog.
Yep.
This book is called Solutions and Other Problems. And I was lucky enough a few weeks back to get it in hardcover at a discounted rate, so that was even cheaper than me buying it in paperback. It is a wonderful, very heartfelt book where you're having to follow along with this person who is neuroatypical, who is dealing with a lot of stressors and loss in her life in the ensuing years between her prior book and this. And in this moment, especially, it is connecting with me because I can understand the way in which her brain is trying to elicit all of this emotion and all of these interactions to people. There is a connection that I feel strongly with this individual, with the way that she depicts managing one's own emotional and mental well-being, her health. Don't you love how words join like that, kids? But I highly recommend that if you have an opportunity to either get it on loan from your local library in a very health conscious way, mind you, or if you want to purchase it from wherever books are sold, please pick up either and Hyperbole and a Half, as well as Solutions and Other Problems. You will not be disappointed. At the very least, funny pictures go brrr.
All right. Well, thank you, Bob, for joining us this week. Do you have any plugs for us?
I certainly do. Shit, the pop didn't happen. My plugs include this week, the usual. Find me at bobskerryvoa.com if you want to hire me as your voice actor for character, commercial, promotion, or narration jobs. You can also find me on itch.io as a creator now of a game piece for your tabletop role-playing game pleasure. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and a slew of other social websites by looking at my handle, bobskerryvoa. I think that's the lot. Yeah, so I'll hand it off to you.
All right, well, we also like to thank our audio maven, Lev Van Rensselaer, for keeping us sounding cool and crisp. And I am your host, Patrick Scale. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, animations, video essays, behind-the-scenes footage, and so much more at quixoticunited.com, and presumably similar social media with a similar sounding name. Thank you all for listening. Bob, tell the audience why you like to swim in a duck balloon.
What? Don't you dare fucking cut that out. I've been listening.
It never plays. It never plays. I'd rather just make a jingle.
Okay, yeah, then I would prefer that because I thought it would be able to be heard. What if I do?
I just think no one's going to think that that's walking. I'll make a little jingle.
I think it's dumb, and that's why I do it, okay?
But like that, but it's just like, what? It's just a random sound happening.
It's like a radio thing, you know?
Yeah, but nobody's getting what you're doing. They just think it's a random sound happening in the background.
Okay, fine. I've been picturing this hangar that we're hanging out in and talking, and we're finally going to this little corner where we sit in these egg chairs around like a very mid-century modern table, and that's where we start discussing our nerd shit.
I don't know if anybody else is doing that.